Today, we're going to talk about something really profound and, honestly, pretty troubling. It's the story of a dramatic shift in Iraq, about how a nation that was once a beacon for women's rights in the region has seen those protections just systematically dismantled. So let's dive into how this happened.
Now, to really get a grip on this, we're not going to start way back in the past. We're starting with a brutal event from just last year that sent shockwaves through the country. It's a grim marker for where things stand today. So picture this. It's New Year's Eve in the city of Basra. A teenage girl is just walking by herself along the riverside Corniche. All of a sudden, she's surrounded by a mob. And what happens next is just a chilling reflection of a society in decline. She was grabbed, groped, kicked, and beaten. And this wasn't some hidden crime happening in the shadows. The entire horrific assault was filmed and then posted online, where it went viral. Her own mother had to publicly plead for people to take the videos down, explaining that the trauma and the humiliation had left her daughter suicidal.
You know, an Iraqi journalist, Nermeen Al-Mufti, she framed this incident perfectly. She argued that this wasn't just some random act of violence. No, it was an alarm bell, a symptom of a really deep-seated illness running through Iraqi society.
So get this, 17 assailants were arrested for the attack. But as of today, not a single one has been sentenced. They all remain at large. In fact, the governor of Basra just dismissed the whole thing, saying it was nothing to make a fuss about.
This story is shocking all on its own, but it becomes even more jarring when you find out about Iraq's past. And it raises this really crucial question. How did a country that once looked so different get to this point?
And this right here really illustrates the stark contrast. You see, before the 1990s, Iraq was considered a pioneer in the Arab world for women's rights, often compared to Tunisia. But today, the UN says it's a country where over 1 million women and girls are at risk of gender-based violence.
And let's be specific here. Iraqi women once had state-funded daycare, education, and healthcare. That included reproductive health, a right that was still being debated in many Western countries back then. By the early 80s, nearly half of all doctors in Iraq were women. It was the first Arab nation to have a female judge and the first to have a female government minister.
And this isn't just some footnote in a history book. It's a lived memory. As one Iraqi woman whose own husband was killed by Saddam's regime put it so bluntly, despite all the political turmoil of the past, she said, things were better before for women.
So, what happened? How did decades of progress just get completely erased? Well, the sources point to 3 critical turning points that basically unraveled the very fabric of Iraqi society, and with it, the protections it used to give to women. It really began in the 1990s. The UN sanctions were absolutely crushing. They triggered an economic collapse, pushing women out of the public workforce. Families became more and more dependent on conservative, tribal, and religious networks just to survive. Then, of course, the 2003 US-led invasion brought chaos and what's known as the militarization of society. In its aftermath, the new constitution was rewritten along sectarian religious lines, which empowered parties who wanted to replace the secular civil code, the very thing that had guaranteed women's rights, with their own conservative interpretations of religious law. The academic expert Ruba Ali al-Hassani uses this very specific term, the militarization of society. And this isn't just about soldiers in the streets. No, it's a process where violence becomes normalized in everyday life. And that leads directly to a spike in domestic abuse, public harassment, and threats against women. This whole decline wasn't just social, it was actually codified. The legal framework that once protected women was actively dismantled and then replaced with laws that actually put them at risk. Let's take a look at how this happened. So first, Iraq's really progressive 1959 personal status law was just chipped away. This was the law that had set 18 as the minimum age for marriage and protected women in things like divorce and custody battles. But as religious parties gained power, they gave more and more authority to Islamic courts in family matters. The devastating result? Well, this shift effectively legalized child marriage, since some clerics interpret religious law as allowing for the marriage of girls as young as 9 years old. And this isn't just a theoretical thing. The impact is clear, and it's measurable. Look at this statistic from UNICEF. As of late 2024, nearly 28% of Iraqi women between the ages of 20 and 24 were married before they turned 18. That's more than 1 in every 4 young women. And in a move that is truly Orwellian, the government has started to erase the very language needed to fight for equality. In 2023, the State Media Commission banned all media outlets from using the word gender. And that just raises a chilling question.
How can you advocate for gender equality if the word itself is outlawed? All of this brings us to today, a period that many activists and academics are describing in the most dire terms imaginable. We're seeing the cumulative effect of all these social and legal changes playing out right now. This chart really illustrates that deep, systemic inequality. According to UN data, Iraqi women spend nearly a quarter of their day on unpaid care and domestic work. For men, that number is just over 4%. This huge gap represents a massive barrier to economic and social participation. Now, some people might point to the fact that Iraq has a 25% quota for women in parliament as a sign of progress. But activists on the ground, like gender issues consultant Awatef Rashid, she calls it a fake system. She says these women are often not independent voices for feminism, but are instead chosen by party leaders and remain totally submissive to conservative religious agendas. So, when you consider everything, the violence, the legal rollbacks, the social regression, it leads to this very stark question, one posed by academic Ruba Ali Al-Hassani. Is this the darkest period of time for women in Iraq's history?
But this story doesn't end solely in despair. It ends with the incredible resilience of Iraqi women themselves. An older woman who lived through it all, from the secular 80s to the chaos of today, offered this powerful parting thought. After sharing her story of loss and struggle, she smiled and said, "Don't worry, you are strong, like an Iraqi woman." And that leaves us to wonder, in the face of systemic erasure, is that strength the last and most important line of defense?